revolutionary FAR overhaul, some of the things that are happening in the NDAA, the 26 budget, and OMB directives. My name is Shirley Collier. I'm the president and founder of Scale to Market and host of the Growth Masters Federal Podcast. For those of you who are familiar with our program, we normally record and then you listen to a recording, but today this issue is so important we decided just to go live. I'd like to introduce very briefly our co-presenters and also co-sponsor. First, our co-sponsor is Brontide and George Papadopoulos is going to be talking about Brontide for just a few minutes. George.
Thank you, Shirley. Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I am George Papadopoulos, and I am an audit partner at Brontide. At Brontide, we provide a wide range of accounting and advisory services, primarily supporting government contractors. Our services include financial statement audits, reviews, 401k audits, as well as tax advisory, tax planning, and tax preparation services. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today for this webinar, and especially thank our panelists, Shirley, Cherylyn, and Lisa, for taking your time today to share your expertise with us. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Shirley, to begin today's session.
Yes, thank you, George. So our co-presenters today are Lisa Anderson, Strategic Business Advisor and Virtual CFO at Anavo Transformation Solutions, and Cherylyn Harley LeBon, Partner at Cohen Seglias. Hope I'm pronouncing that properly.
Seglias.
Say that again.
Seglias.
Seglias, thank you. But Lisa, I'd like for you to introduce yourself a little more fully, and then Cherylyn for you to do the same.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Shirley and George, for inviting me to speak this afternoon. I am Lisa Anderson. My company is Anavo Transformation Solutions. We are a strategic advisory and virtual CFO company for federal government contractors, companies that are in and around federal government contracting. I've been doing this thing for a lot of decades now, but essentially what we do is we help companies with establishing appropriate financial structures, their financial reporting. We also help with compliance and, again, strategic advisory.
Great. And Cherylyn?
I'm Cherylyn Harley LeBon. I'm a partner and chair at Cohen Seglias, Palace, Greenhall, and Furman is the full name. And I have 30 years experience working at the intersection of business and government. I started my career as a high-level lawyer in the House of Representatives and in the U.S. Senate. So in both those roles, I helped companies of all sizes navigate working with the federal government and help them navigate legislative and regulatory issues with the federal government. And I am a chair and partner at my firm where I help companies in the DMV as well as all over the country navigate working with the federal government, from NDAs and teaming agreements up to claims, bid protests, and then finally also acquisition and exit. So there really isn't much I've seen that I have not seen, but I will tell you this experience with this new administration is a whole new world, which we are all having to navigate.
Yes, and we're going to be jumping into that. But Cherylyn, I know that as an attorney, you have to make a disclaimer statement.
I do. Everything I say here is for educational purposes. So I would not want anyone to take anything that I am saying as advice, and that's something that you should take to the bank, so to speak.
Great, thank you. So this is our agenda. We're going to have a three-way discussion, Lisa, Cherylyn, and myself. We're going to then open up the floor to questions, but please ask us questions via the chat feature as we're talking. If you're thinking of things that you'd like for us to answer at the end of our discussion, then we will address those at that time. We will be recording, or we are recording this session, and we're going to make the link to the recording accessible to everyone who registers, and we'll also put the recording, the audio and the video recording, up on the Growth Masters Federal Podcast channel and on the YouTube channel for listening and viewing on demand. And we'll send that link out to everyone who registered for today's session. Okay, so to get us started, the good news for federal contractors is that the 2026 budget has actually increased. It grew to 4.8 trillion with a T, over 4.6 trillion in 2025. But the spending priorities have changed, and procurement rules are undergoing massive changes mandated by a number of executive orders. Executive Order 14275 is the one that we're going to be primarily talking about today. It aims to increase procurement efficiency by eliminating FAR clauses that are not codified in law. So almost all 53 parts of the FAR now have been modified and posted to the acquisition.gov website. The changes are called deviations. It's important to note that. However, rather than waiting for them to be approved by Congress, which is normally the process, and signed into law, these changes are being implemented immediately. Not all agencies have adopted them, but we're going to be talking about that a little bit more. But it is important to note that some of these changes are being implemented as we speak. There are other executive orders that also direct agencies to inject innovation, leverage technology, and to improve operational efficiency. This summer, the BBB was passed by Congress and signed into law by the president, and it established priorities for the budget and for policies. The NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, has been going through the House and the Senate throughout the summer. It is expected to be reconciled and presented to Congress. We're hearing that that will be taken up before the end of the calendar year. So, although many of these changes have not been approved by Congress or signed into law, they give us a harbinger of things to come. Some good for small businesses, some bad for small businesses. That's what we're discussing briefly today from three perspectives: the legal, financial, and business development perspectives, to give small GovCon C-suite executives a heads up on the procurement rules that are changing so you can plan and pivot to win profitable contracts going forward. So Shirley, I want to start with you.
Yep.
And the changes to FAR Part 19 and how
My favorite.
Yes.
Somewhat facetiously.
We're all been studying that since September 26. But the first question is regarding the rule of two. What was retained and what was changed?
And let me also talk about all of the advocacy and lobbying efforts that went into the rule of two. Obviously, it's very important to small businesses, and I was a part of a lot of small business groups that really weighed in on this aspect with the rewriting of the FAR, because of course, we really don't know who these people were or are that rewrote the FAR. I would say that this process, I think I could say diplomatically that I feel that this process was somewhat done in secret, right? And we had limited information on the people that were making all of these big changes. So I was happy to see that regarding the rule of two, there were many small businesses who were participating in this process and writing to their legislatures and writing to their congressmen and senators about it. Okay, that's sort of setting the table. So what does FAR 19 do? It keeps two or more small businesses between micro threshold and the simplified acquisition threshold, SAT, and rule of two above the SAT. It reaffirms that the rule of two does not apply to task orders under MAX. And the contracting officers, again, contracting officers may set aside a task order, but they're not required. They're not required. And the decision not to set aside a task order is not protestable.
Mhm.
So, Cherylyn, I want to stay with you for the next change to Part 19. Contracting officers are not allowed to ask small businesses to recertify as small
at the task order level.
Unless there's an event like an M&A or contract novation.
Novations, right.
Yeah. So can you clarify that and what the impact will be on small businesses?
So that means that a business that holds a prime position on an IDIQ, BPA, or a MAC that is no longer small can still compete for the small business task order for the life of their prime contract. Now, you know, if you think about it, it's consistent with what we're currently doing, which is always you are at the size of your company is what you are at the time of award, right? That's what you always need to keep in mind. And that's the size that you remain throughout the duration of the contract. So this appears to be consistent, Shirley and Lisa, with how we've been operating, right? So I'm okay with this one. And again, I think it's consistent with what we've been doing.
So the only complaint that I have about the way it's being done now, and it's been reinforced, and that is that a small business can size out, and
Yes.
a multi-award contract can be a 10-year instrument.
Yep.
And they can size out, and for 4 or 5 years conceptually still compete against little tiny businesses
Yes.
for task orders.
Yes.
under that
Yeah.
master
Yeah.
contract.
That is not awesome, but in the grand scheme of things, Shirley, it could be worse.
It could be worse.
It could be worse. There's a lot
Yes.
of other worse things in this far that I do not like for small businesses.
Yeah.
This, not awesome, but it could be worse.
Yeah. Well, we're going to come back to some more Part 19 changes for small businesses. But Lisa, I want to come to you to ask about some of the financial regulatory changes that are being proposed. So from a financial standpoint, what should small businesses be preparing for first as FAR changes take effect? What do you see as the biggest risk versus biggest opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when we think about, or when we consider the time when the executive order started flying and DOGE came onto the scene, the words of the day were fraud, waste, and abuse, right? The government was reforming to identify and eliminate these activities, which honestly, they should have been working, they've been working on forever. But now suddenly it's at a heightened level. So essentially, what I'm seeing right now is that it's still an underlying theme. So while we may not be hearing those words in the news, we're hearing those words as it relates to contract changes, task order changes, some of the contracts that have been eliminated. Fraud, waste, and abuse is a component of that. I have a client that works with the Department of Energy, and they recently received a notification that their contract was ending, or it has ended since then. But the underlying reason was they are investigating fraud, waste, and abuse organizationally as an agency. So as small businesses, what I think is extremely important in this space is that we tighten up our financial responsibility, because what I do know and what I have seen is that DCAA, if you're not familiar with them, is the Defense Contract Audit Agency, as well as other cost determination offices, are now starting to ramp up their audits. They're looking to evaluate contractor activity, and contracting officers are looking more closely at their contractors' ability to justify their pricing, to manage their cash flow, and to support the indirect rates or the buildup associated with their pricing. Now, is that new? No. But what I do think is in recent years, the audits have been somewhat relaxed. We didn't see nearly as many as we had. I mean, I've been in this industry for, I hate to say it, but almost 40 years. And in the early years, we saw DCA a lot. And then things slowed down. And I think we're going to start to see DCA a lot more now. And the audits are lasting a little bit longer than they normally have. That comes from the experience that I'm having with a couple of clients that I've been working with. The biggest risk that I see for companies is that they don't truly understand their own cost structure in many cases. And their indirect rates aren't based on, their billing rates aren't based on real data. So you want to make certain that you tighten up your accounting systems, that your organization is audit ready. And we get a lot of questions about, well, can we ask DCAA to come in and audit us? The answer is no. The DCAA does not work for you as a contractor. DCAA works for the federal government. So only a contracting officer or DCMA can issue an audit by DCAA. There are outside firms that can conduct an audit, but nonetheless, you want to make certain that you are tightening up your systems and establishing consistency as you develop your pricing strategies.
That's very good advice. Lisa, I want to stay with you. Two objectives of the RFO and many of the changes that are embedded in the NDAA are, number one, speed up procurement, and number two, to acquire commercial items rather than developing things from scratch for the government. What does this mean for small businesses? How can small businesses adjust their pricing strategies to stay competitive without shrinking their margins? And what financial mistakes do you expect most companies to make?
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day in this space it's important to understand that procurement offices are always looking for the fastest path to get the best solutions, right? So we see this currently in our current contract environment and in past contract environments where procurement officers were looking to do set-asides because that's a fast path to procurement. They're looking at GSA schedules as a fast path to procurement and GWACs. So you want to keep that in mind. And I think that is going to continue, well, maybe not the set-aside component, but the GSA schedules and the GWACs will continue to be a key component. So what I believe is that creates a really good advantage for small businesses if you're ready, right? So what that means is moving forward, you want to establish commercial, you want to function as a commercial entity. What I mean by that is you want to start putting pricing schedules in place. You want to categorize your offerings and start to catalog your pricing. You still will need to go through the process of developing and supporting your price development and your the end price that you're offering to the government. But you want to be in a position where you already have a catalog, right? You have labor categories, standard labor categories that you're bidding on a regular basis, and you have a catalog of prices that essentially meet those those labor categories. If you're not on a GSA schedule, you may want to start looking at getting on the GSA schedule. If you're not bidding on GWACs or government contract vehicles, you want to start bidding on those contract vehicles, because for the federal government, these are prices that are already vetted, right? They're already vetted. You've gone through the process of establishing a price, and you've gone through the process with the government to ensure that the price is good and effective for the federal government. So they're already vetted. Where I see there will be risk to small businesses in this particular instance is discounting their prices without research, discounting their prices without evaluating the impact of that discount on their business and their organization. So I still think that companies will need to, in this commercial pricing environment, they will still need to do the evaluation process. I think the cataloging pricing makes it easier to compare your prices against the competition, because in many cases the schedule prices are published and they're publicly known, so you can go out and do some evaluation on that. but you want to make certain that you are always evaluating the price and that it's not hurting the bottom line and cash flow of your business. The fastest pathway to the bottom line, cutting your prices, is not the answer.
Yep. I would agree with that, Lisa. Very, very good advice. You can win a federal contract with margins that are so low that they actually put you out of business.
Absolutely.
Okay, Cherylyn, I want to come back to you. There are a few additional FAR deviations in Part 19 that I'd like to discuss. One is that contracting officers are no longer required to prioritize socioeconomically certified companies over other small businesses, and 8A set-aside contracts can be moved out of the 8A contract upon recompete. What do you think what impact that will have on 8A companies?
So I'm going to take this question in two parts, because the first part is contracting officers are no longer required to prioritize socioeconomically certified companies. So I represent a wide variety of government contractors. The ones that are not certified are very happy about the first part of your question, because they feel that there's more of a level of the playing field, right? They feel that if they don't have certifications, then it's super hard for them to compete, right? I mean, I'm not giving validity to either, right? I'm just giving you what the perspective is of people, right?
Yep.
So those that do not hold certifications are super excited. They're like, this is going to open up more opportunities for our company, yada, yada. Yeah. Obviously, the socioeconomically certified companies, Hub Zones, WOSB, EDWOSB, feel that this will hurt them, that this decision will hurt them. And that if contracting officers have the opportunity to not prioritize them, they will not. Now, again, folks, these new rules are exactly that. They're new, and it's December. So we're going to need to see how things are actually applied in practice. We need to be able to see this. I just, with the shutdown, with things still ramping up, I kind of need to see some evidence. I need to see some trends. I need to get some calls. I need to see what's coming down the pike. So those are the two perspectives I have, from those that do have the certifications and those that do not. Now, with respect to 8A set-aside contracts being moved out of the 8A program, that is obviously does not make SBA happy, right? For our audience, I spent 4 years as a political appointee at SBA, having oversight over the 8A program, a program that I know intimately and very well. This does not make SBA happy because SBA owns the 8A program. Yeah. And SBA spends a lot of time working with other agencies, trying to get them to make their contracts and maintain and retain these contracts as 8A. So obviously this does not make them happy, because they feel that this is running counter to the whole point of the 8A program. So that's what I can tell you about that.
So another change is that 8A contracts have to be competed first under a GWAC or GSA schedule, and only if there are not at least 2 qualified 8As who can perform the work can the 8A contract be sole sourced. Am I correct in that interpretation?
So, Shirley, that's a very good question. And I have spent time on the phone with GSA and SBA on this issue. And I will say it this way, without affirmation or denial. I think they are still working this aspect out, because there's always been a rivalry between SBA and GSA regarding these contracts. And I'll tell you, Shirley and Lisa, this change is not helping the situation at all. And I will say, I really think this particular provision, it remains to be seen how it's really going to flesh out, and how this provision is going to really, how it's going to function in reality. Let's put it that way. Because I don't know how they're going to do this. I really don't know how they're going to do this and allow SBA to have that ownership over the 8A program.
I agree, and I'm hearing the same things and that you are, Sherilyn. I talked to one agency, and they say, "Oh yes, we understand everything has to be competed, no more sole source," and others are like, "Nope, that's not how we interpret." So it's just crazy. What we're going to do for participants of today's seminar is that we're going to be sharing a link with you to the specific part of FAR Part 19, so you can see for yourself the wording of that. There's also a GSA memo that came out at the same time that the deviations from on Part 19 came out. So we'll send you the links to both of those current information, but just know that it could change. It's still under discussion, even though it's supposedly in effect. There's only certain agencies that have adopted it, right, Shirley?
Yeah. And let me say, I mean, I'm getting emails from clients about sole source contracts. So, I mean, I don't know what they were thinking when they wrote this provision, but there's plenty of agencies doing sole source contracts, folks. They are. And I also think there are plenty of contracting officers who are having a hard time keeping up with the FAR revisions. So
they haven't been trained. They haven't been trained.
So I think that's another thing the audience needs to understand, that there's going to be a whole, for lack of a better term, we are going to have a whole period of confusion. Okay.
Yes.
Because there's going to be people who are still operating off the old FAR because they have yet to understand the new FAR. And there's all these, and then there's everything in between. There's the old FAR, there's the new FAR, it's up for interpretation. There's going to be some contracting officers who interpret the new FAR deviations this way. Others are going to do this. The lawyers are going to interpret it another way. I mean, it's really, we are we are headed towards a serious period of confusion.
Yes.
But Cherylyn, isn't that how it always goes, though?
Yes. Whenever
I know this period of time is very intense. I know that.
Yep.
Yes.
But when we look at history and how things have changed over time, isn't that? And then once we make our interpretations, then we're back to business as usual.
Right.
Whatever that's going to be.
Yeah. But Lisa, that's the question. I don't know when it's going to be business as usual, because already with the FAR that we had since 1984, I always tell clients there's the FAR, there's the interpretation of the FAR, and then there's the application. Three totally different things. And now we have all this whole new set of rules, the deviation is what I call it, that it's going to take time for people to not only interpret it, but every agency may be interpreting things differently, especially when it comes to 8A contracts, because in my opinion, I think this administration would love to get rid of the 8A program, but so that everybody understands, I've said this for years upon years, the 8A program is law, and the only way to get rid of it is to introduce legislation to eliminate said law. That has not been done. I believe Mike Lee does have legislation to eliminate the 8A program, and I think there's some other members out there sort of with some other sort of deviation. But again, in order to get rid of the 8A program, you have to introduce legislation that passes both chambers of Congress, gets signed into law, and is signed by the president. That's it. As you know, many of you are very familiar, and you paid attention to Schoolhouse Rock. You know that's a very long process.
Yes.
However, let me say a couple things. There are things that can be done to water down the program, or in effect, just stop progress. So as you all know, we have this full-scale audit of the 8A program going on.
Yep.
And it is my understanding that while that full-scale audit is going on, they are not accepting any 8A applicants. And if you are in the queue for your certification to be approved without some very extraordinary circumstances or exceptions, you're still waiting in the queue. Now, there are exceptions. I have clients who have met those exceptions, but for the most part, the 8A program and the new certifications are pretty much on pause. Again, so this is another way, in my opinion, of stalling the program, right? Is saying we're doing a full-scale audit, and while we're doing an audit of the program, we're not going to allow any more applicants in.
Right.
Again, if you pick up the phone and talk to somebody from SBA, you may or may not get an official response. This is what I'm telling you. You can't, you can't use my name, but this is my understanding of the situation there.
So I want to point out that although there are restrictions now in the small business program, there are that competition outside of the small business program is being relaxed.
Of course.
So the simplified acquisition procedures
Yes.
have changed. So thresholds for micro purchases went from 10,000 to 25,000.
To 25,000. I mean, the bottom line here is that the FAR revisions appear to benefit large businesses.
Yes.
That's it. I mean,
Yes.
there's no other way to say it. It appears that the revisions are designed to support larger businesses. Now, obviously, I think the people who have rewritten the FAR must clearly be confused and don't understand that the backbone of how the government contracting industry works is that you have big teaming with small. So someone is clearly confused that if you don't have these two elements working together, you really don't have the government contracting industry, because large businesses cannot perform all the functions of what is needed in the government contracting industry, which is truly $1 trillion industry. So, like so many things that have happened since January, I do believe people are clearly confused.
Yes, they are. So what I'm telling my small businesses is you can take advantage of the SAP, the Simplified Acquisition Procedures, and understand these thresholds. So right now, the SAT threshold went from 250,000 to 500,000.
That's right.
That's a direct award, non-compete direct
That's
award, and it's rising to $10 million over the next 5 years. Direct award, non-compete. The SPEED Act, which is embedded in the NDAA, sets the DoD specific threshold immediately to 10 million, and that is eventually rising to 50 million.
That's right. And I mean, these are significant numbers that I think everybody on this webinar needs to understand. Like you need to pay attention and understand that the playing field has dramatically changed.
Yes.
These are significant numbers.
Yes. And you can play at that same game as a small business.
You can, but you need to understand the rules of the game have shifted.
Yes.
Agree 100%. So Lisa, I want to come back to you. Given that there will be increased competition for small businesses, what are the top financial red flags that would disqualify a firm from an award, even if their proposal is strong?
Sure, absolutely. So some of them we've already talked about. One is inconsistency or unstable indirect rates. You want to make certain that what you are proposing is realistic, that you keep the ideas of reasonable and allowable in mind as you're developing your pricing and the indirect rates that are associated with the development of that pricing. High dependency on one client or contract. That's a huge, huge, huge financial concern. If a customer is evaluating you as a contractor and 60 to 70% of your revenue is coming from one income stream, that's a concern. And that should be a concern for you as well. That's a concern for your banker. If we haven't learned anything from what's going on right now, the major lesson is to diversify. We've got to get to the point where we're diversifying our client base. Negative equity or high debt to equity ratios. Now, you probably are wondering, when does a contracting officer ever take a look at those things? Well, you may have already had some proposals where they're asking for copies of your financial statements. DCAA can do a financial capabilities audit, and these are some of the things that they're looking for. So you want to be able to ensure that you are a financially healthy and viable organization by maintaining positive equity through making certain that you're profitable, but also that you're not drawing equity out of the company, because that then also depletes your cash flow. Frequent or late vendor payments or accounts payable backlogs, that's a concern for your contracting officers as well, because if you're not paying your vendors, who ultimately may be your subcontractors, that creates a pain point for the customer. So you want to make certain that you are paying your vendors on time. And then lack of adequate insurance and bonding. You want to make certain that the company has adequate coverage that doesn't create any increased risk or exposure to your customer. So those are some of the key things. One thing before I forget to mention this is proper timekeeping. That is one of the areas that as we go through the process of more financial scrutiny or compliance scrutiny, one of the areas that the government is going to look at is your timekeeping practices. And so you want to make certain that you have good practices in place, that you're following the federal government guidelines as it relates to timekeeping, that there's no mischarging. So you want to make it, and do the best way to do that is to do some internal audits of your own to ensure that your timekeeping is appropriate.
So Lisa and Cherylyn, I had a few more questions on my list to ask you, but we have several questions coming in from the audience. So if you don't have any objection, I'd like to jump over to audience questions.
Sure.
So the first one is, we are graduating 8A. What can we tell our customers to educate them on taking our contract out of the 8A program? Customer, I guess, meaning the government customer.
Mm-hmm. I think that I'll just talk to it from my experience and what clients that I've worked with have done. First of all, you want to establish a really good relationship with your core and your contracting officer. This is not a conversation that should be had in the nth hour of you graduating. This is something that you're talking to your contracting officer about as it relates to the complexity of the work, the type of work that you're doing, your past performance on the work, and just having some discussion with them about continuity and continuing the mission of the organization without disruption. It's not just the fact that, you want them to switch over to follow you, but to switch over from 8A to another vehicle, 8A to, a GSA schedule. But it is about continuing the mission and also continuing to maintain that continuity, especially if you've been in that organization doing this work for quite a long period of time.
And I want to clarify what the RFO is saying, and Cherylyn, you may want to weigh in on this. When contract is taken out of the 8A program upon recompete, it still has to stay in the small business set-aside program. It can't go to full and open, correct?
Correct. That is my understanding. Again, there's not a whole lot of people out there clarifying things right now.
Yep.
But
Yep.
it's my understanding. My interpretation is as good as yours. Somebody else's may be different, but that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing also is that if you're graduating 8A, you can talk to the contracting office about making it a WOSB set aside fairly easily if you are a WOSB.
Or whatever else you are.
Yeah.
Right? You could be STVOSB or VOSB or Hub Zone. I mean, here's what people need to understand. And I think I probably say this every day to clients. Contracting officers have broad latitude. They can be your friend or your foe. We always want to make them your friend, particularly in times that this person just asked this question. Per Lisa's point, if you have a relationship with them, you've been working with them at this agency for a while, you are close to your core or your CO and you have a good relationship, again, don't wait to the last minute to bring up this conversation. You know, if it's a 5-year contract, you probably should have had this conversation 4 years ago if you've got a year left on it. Okay.
Yeah.
So these are, especially now, even now with all these changes going on, now is the time for you to really have a very close relationship with your contracting officer. Work on the communication. You know, ask them for feedback. What can I do to improve? Are you pleased with the performance? Is there anything, you know, what else can we do? The other thing I've seen clients do that are graduating out of the 8A program, they start to team with other existing 8As, right? So that you still have access to 8A contracts, right? You can do that through joint venture agreements, mentor protege. Now, with this new rule, I just don't know how much that's going to be helpful. Again, we just have to see how things play out. But if you're graduating and you kind of still want to have some access to those type of contracts, the way you're going to do that is through, obviously, mentor protege or joint venture agreement.
And there's a follow-up question from that same person saying an 8A contract can be removed from the small business program if it evolves into a new requirement, more scope and funds over 25%, correct? And I think that is correct.
Yeah, but that can happen in any case, right? I mean, right? I mean,
that wasn't a change from at the RFO.
Yeah, I mean, they can always change the scope. And change it from 8A to something else. They can always do that. That, again, is also an agency and contracting officer discretion.
So another question here is for small businesses not being asked to recertify during the life of the contract. Does that include option years or just the base? And my understanding is that it would be base plus all the option years.
I believe it is base plus option. Again, I haven't worked on this year with all these changes. I haven't done a lot of GovCon M&A. I've done some, but I haven't done a transaction where we had to recert. So I wish I had an example in practice, but I don't. I don't. So I can't really, I can't give you an answer in practice. I've done some transactions, but it didn't involve research. So I'm anxious to do one so I can see how this works. So I can put the new rules in place.
Another question is,
I think it was January 20th, January 19th, Shirley. What was it? January 19th, 20th.
Yes.
January 20th is my date.
The 20th.
Yes. It's been a year.
Right.
So another question is, since these changes are not law, quote unquote, does an agency have to adopt it? What I'm seeing, Cherylyn and Lisa, is that agencies themselves are opting in or not.
Right. I was just going to say, it's really up to the agency.
Yeah.
These are, these aren't decisions we can make. It's really up to the agency. They are deciding what they want to play ball with and what they don't want to play ball with. And DOD is a whole new world, because the secretary has got all new sets of acquisition rules and whatnot. So those of you who are doing business with DOD, you're going to have to spend the time staying up on top of that stuff for your particular program.
And DOD has not accepted the RFO.
Right.
So far.
Because Secretary Hegseth has got all these other acquisition rules and things that he's promulgated. He's got a whole new set of things.
Yes. And in fact, I made some notes to share with the audience, and we'll put this in the show notes and send it out via email to all the attendees, that there are a couple of programs that are embedded in the NDAA. There's the transition to the warfighter to accelerate technology adoption. There's the software acquisition pathway, which actually has been around for a couple of years, but that's being accelerated. The innovation ecosystem initiative. And then there are a number of programs to encourage advanced manufacturing, including developing an advanced manufacturing workforce that's going to be subsidized by the government. And some small businesses can definitely benefit from that. So we'll send you all those links.
If you are working in any of those areas, it will be, the onus is on you to stay on top of these very specific, discrete things that the secretary has promulgated, these new rules regarding those specific programs.
Yes, I
because it's a lot to keep up with.
It is. Lisa, I don't want to end without addressing the new CPARs.
Oh boy.
So can you very quickly kind of talk about the essence of some of the changes that are coming about for the CPAR system?
Yeah, so primarily, I think it's important to note that the rankings and the categories will be changing. And what I mean by that, it will be very difficult for contractors to get that exceptional rating. The federal agencies and corps will have to go through the process of supporting exceptional ratings as an exception. So for the most part, standard, meeting expectations, satisfactory will be the main category. But if you're a contractor that has not leveraged your PMR, your monthly program management reporting as a way to capture and communicate the exceptional work that you're doing, then you're doing yourself a disadvantage. This is something that I think contractors should have been doing for quite some time, but really you want to focus in on qualitative and quantitative measures. Things, again, I think Cherylyn mentioned it earlier. What is it that you're absolutely doing throughout the course of doing business that is exceptionally helping to advance the mission of the organization? And you want to make certain that those things are adequately documented throughout the life cycle of your contract, and not waiting until you get to a performance evaluation rating to try to negotiate for an exceptional rating. This is something that your PMR has become a component of your contract. It becomes a component of your contract file. This information is documented. And so it's going to be important that you ensure that you're having these conversations throughout the life cycle of the contract. So you can't just, again, wait until we get close to that evaluation time. There could be potentially other changes that will be coming, again, where there just be one standard evaluation. So it happens systematically. That hasn't occurred yet. But for right now, I think it's really making certain that you are staying in communication with your contracting officers and knowing that you have to fight for that exceptional rating.
Yep.
And I would add to that to ask the contracting office and your contracting office representative, what are the measurements of success at the beginning of the project? Don't wait until the end.
Right.
How
So-
do you measure success?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
has to be measurable.
Absolutely. Yep. That should be a question at your kickoff.
Yes, that, there's always the, what do they call it? The kickoff meeting before you start start performing on the contract.
Yep.
And Shirley and Lisa are absolutely right. That should be the question that should always be asked. Keep it on a sticky on your laptop. How do you measure success?
Yeah.
I'd like to be aligned on what success looks like for both of us.
Yeah.
So one final comment before we wrap up. These RFO deviations have not been implemented by the Department of Defense. As we said earlier, they have not been codified in law. I want to reemphasize that. If you do not like any of these changes, please reach out to your elected officials, and we're going to send you a link so you can find out very quickly and easily who your elected representatives are. So Lisa and Cherylyn, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge today.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for having us. Thank you to George and Brontide. This has been fun.
Yes, George, if you want to come back on line here for just a second, I know you've been, there we go. Thank you for helping to co-sponsor this, and thank you all for attending. Look for an email from us with links to a number of resources. Have a good day.
Awesome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Okay.